welcome to the Valley Players. I am Joe Roberts, and we are here for a Q&A session with esteemed author Ted L. Turner. Not the Ted Turner. He doesn't own the Braves or anything like that.
In my eyes, this is the Ted Turner.
You are the Ted Turner. You have written maybe the, what do they call that? The height of all books, right? You've written this book.
Wow.
It's the Tornado's Daughter. Let me get right here. The Tornado's Daughter. And we just happen to be here. And I don't know if you call Catherine your co-author or how do you say that, Ted?
I haven't really thought about it in those terms. Catherine is the Tornado's daughter. And so this book would not exist without her experiences and her willingness to share those experiences with the world.
Perfect. So if you are just joining us live or if you're going to join us later on when you watch this on YouTube, we've got Ted Turner. Gosh, do I have to say the L?
That's fine.
It's like that classic song.
Yes.
Remember the S. All right. Ted L. Turner. All right. Catherine Hare and her husband Josh Hare. And again, I'm Joe Roberts. I want to thank the Valley Players for allowing us to use this space for the Q&A session. I want to thank the Liberty High School AV team for setting up the cameras and running all the stuff. And then want to thank the Valley Players board, particularly Jackie Smith, for allowing us to use all this cool stuff right in here. So let's...
And Friends of the Library.
Friends of the Library.
Yes.
Cannot forget the Friends of the Library. I don't want to get any undue library fines or anything like that. So, having said that, let's kind of take a look at this book and just jump on in. And I am one of those people, Ted, that whenever I get a book, I've always tried to consume it as much as I possibly can. I've never been one to continue to eat from a book that didn't fill me up. And quite frankly, I could not put this book down. I could not put it down. I'm a fast reader. I read this in about 4 hours because I just could not stop reading the book.
I'm glad to hear that.
Ted, why is that so? Jump in my brain and tell me why I couldn't put this thing down.
You know, I've heard that comment from a lot of people. People tell me, I just sat down to read for about 15 minutes with my morning coffee, and I looked at the clock, it was 2 o'clock, or had someone say that, they were just going to look at the foreword and ended up reading till 2, 3 in the morning. I think, I would love to think it's because I'm such a great wordsmith. I don't think that's it.
Well,
right?
let's just stop right there. Don't sell yourself short. We've got to sell books later on.
We do have to sell books. It is awesome. I'm the best author you've ever
heard.
Right.
That's right.
I think it's because it's a compelling story. I think also I made 2 conscious decisions. One, I wanted to tell this in Catherine's voice. She's often made the remark, it's her story, it's my book, and that's true. The words are mine. And I don't want to mimic her, but I wanted it to sound like you are not reading a book. I want it to feel like you are in her living room, and she is simply having a conversation with you. And if I've succeeded in that, I think that is a large contributing factor to why people can't put it down. They feel like they've got her right in front of them, and they just want to know, and then. They want to know what the climax of that story is because it's very compelling.
I'm glad that you said that, and then, because at the end of each one of these chapters, that's how I live in a certain climate right now, and people use all these power words, these buzzwords, and one of the words that kind of jumped out to me, a phrase, human trafficking, violence, threatens, assassination, tumultuous, and when you look at all these words, on its face, it seems to be like, why would I personally pick this book up when there's these naughty words, these words that don't bring joy? What's the why behind that?
It's a great question. And often I forewarn people, if they're thinking about buying the book, understand that we will touch on some dark subjects. But it is not a dark book. This book is full of light, is full of humor. One of the reviews that I read, and yes, I read reviews, one of the reviews, I wish I had said it this way, but the person said, as I'm reading this book, I realized I'm not reading a tale of someone's trials and struggles. I'm reading a tale of someone's triumphs. The whole point of this book is life can be unfair. We all struggle. We all have things that happen to us that is unfair, that may be difficult. We can't necessarily choose that. All we can choose is how we react to it. We can wallow in it, or we can draw the strength from it. We can draw the blessings that are in it and turn it to our good. And that's not Pollyannish. I'm not saying just make your mind right and all your troubles go away. They don't. But they're going to be there whether you have a negative or a positive mindset. One of the things that I love is hearing about Charlotte's journey from where she felt like she had no value to realizing she had value, and then realizing even beyond that there's a difference between value and worth, and what does it mean to have worth. This is a powerful message of this book. It is a tale of triumph. It's a tale of the resiliency of the human spirit, which to me has always just impressed the heck out of me when I hear those stories of people that are facing seemingly insurmountable trials, and their attitude is, no, I got this. Whether they may slide back over and over and over again, right? Ultimately, they keep coming back to the, no, I got this. And that's what this book is about. If you start reading the book, finish. another reader tell me, I'm so glad I pushed through and finished, because there are some difficult chapters. There are some difficult stories. But it's the whole story that matters.
Catherine, Josh, you have been, I want to say you've been a big part of my life for, 10 plus years. As soon as we met each other, I feel like we'd known each other our literal entire lives. Catherine, you've had this story on the tip of your tongue, in your heart for years.
Yes.
Years and years. This character of Charlotte Walt, who's the protagonist in the book. See, I know big words.
Big words, good.
This character makes this incredible journey, and I've made some notes here because I don't want to say it wrong. One of the things that kind of picked up immediately was Charlotte is involved in a vicious cycle of this terrible thing happens to her. She somehow manages to crawl out of it. It seems like the sun is about to break over the horizon, and then terrible thing number 2 happens. Somehow she manages to crawl out of that, and we think, oh, the angels are about to sing, and then, are you kidding me? Terrible thing, and it just keeps on going over and over and over again. Tell us about that.
Well, that's pretty much my life in a nutshell. we could keep writing, and it would be the same way. But these hard things that just keep coming and coming, and it feels like just as soon as I get through one, another wave crashes down over me. But I learned a long time ago when I was very young that I told this story as a Christian. I'm a devout Christian, and my feelings is that this is elite spiritual training. In order for me to have a triumph, there has to be something to overcome. In order for me to forgive anyone, there has to be someone who offends me. I cannot be any of those things. I can't be forgiving. I can't be compassionate without knowing suffering. And at a very young age, this was something that I understood. When I say very young age, I suppose I was about 12 when I began to understand these things. And I've never resented these trials that came over me. Just recently, I've had kind of a whopper come through my life, and I realize it expands my compassion. Earlier this year, I was given a cancer diagnosis, and it's kind of more of a cat fight than it was a battle with cancer. But I remember sitting and having something to eat with Joshua. We were in front of the TV, and a St. Jude's commercial came on. And anytime I had seen one before, I had compassion, seeing those poor little kids and their little bald heads, and I felt a lot of compassion. But after having gone through chemo and radiation treatment and knowing what that feels like, when I saw that commercial afterwards, I sobbed. And I couldn't stop crying because the idea of putting chemotherapy in such a tiny little body, I knew what that was like now. And all the experiences that I've gone through gives me the ability to not just be compassionate, but to succor people. The word succor means to help somebody through something because you've been through it yourself. And the more trials that I go through, the more equipped I am to do that for others. Or I could just sit and wallow in it and not do any good for anybody.
Yeah, I've never known you to be a wallower
No.
in that sense. That's not
No.
in your character.
I do feel sorry for myself from time to time, but it never lasts very long.
Josh, in the book, there is a character that I can't help but feel like you had a hand in penning part of that story, right? Charlotte ultimately finds, I'm going to call it hope. And there's that classic song, I forget, like hope in the wrong place, or in a whatever the line
love
is.
in all the wrong places.
Yeah, looking for love in all the wrong places.
I didn't write that.
Okay, that's a TM trademark, copyright. It turned out to be the best decision for this character, but there were some ups and downs, some slippery, slidey things, and there were some major things that happened to this character that I feel like if you were just Clark Kent, you couldn't have overcome it, the character, but you wrote this Superman character, and Superman was able to overcome death, to be destroyed forever. Yet somehow he comes back and becomes one of those shining bright lights in Charlotte's life. And then, despite the fact that she tried to push that character away.
We were talking about this on our way out.
On the way out, it's interesting how just ultimately it was digging deep down. Throughout my childhood years too, my parents said they never gave up on me, even though some of the times I was a really horrible individual when I was a teenage kid. I called myself a punk all the time. I was a punk. And it was just the fact that they never gave up on me. And she has never given up on me.
I think this is I Love You More.
And this was the I Love You More. This was the, because my kids, it was kind of funny, my kids would always say, because we would tell each other, I love you more. No, I love you more. And they're saying, man, can you say that you love mom more than, she loves you, whatever it is. And I would say, look, we're not saying that. We're actually saying that I love you more than I love myself. And you have to do that to have a successful marriage, relationship, whatever it is. You have to lose oneself, lose your pride, I learned a few lessons along the way. Would you rather be happy or right? You can't have both, because a lot of times when you have to be right, you have to be right in certain things, you end up breaking the heart of the individual who you're either talking with or so forth. Mm-hmm. And yeah, this is about the first time I think I've ever been speechless myself, but
well, and now you know why people need to read this book. They're both incredible people.
It is, yeah.
So let's kind of expound on that, Ted. I can't imagine with your background being in lay clergy, from what I understand, a bishop in the church that you attend, that you've probably heard some tales. You've heard some woes. And so here's this adorable, beautiful, part Korean, and I love that. She always says, part Korean, I'm there, especially when she's cooking. I love that part. She comes to you with this, what on the outside seems like, no, that's a lie. No, that didn't happen. Couldn't have happened. No single person could have endured all of that. And then she wants you to tell her story. So not only do you have to fact check it, but then you have to tell it.
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked that, because when we say this is an incredible story, well, if you get down to what the word incredible means, is it a credible story? And I've had a few people question that, not that they didn't believe us, but question that. So let me put everybody's mind at ease. This is a true story. It's a memoir, which means that the story is told through the perspective of the person whose life we're sharing. He's saying that the part of that book that if others want their story told, let them write it. But I also felt it was very important to make sure that I tell a true story. And so some of the memories Charlotte has come from when she's 4 years old. Okay, how accurate are those? We want to find secondary sources. If we can find primary sources to corroborate that, we do. I searched the historical records, especially for things that happened in previous generations in her family. And there are times when we'd talk and I'd say, okay, I know you said this happened in Baytown. It could not have happened in Baytown. And here's why. So let's go find the document. Let's go find something that corroborates where it happened, when it happened. There are no, when you talk about characters, there are no made-up or composite characters in this book. They are all real people. We have changed the names to protect the guilty. And we mean that seriously. There is no advantage to anyone to make their lives miserable, to cost them friendships or reputation. Charlotte has a great love for these folks, so we've changed the names to protect the guilty. No made-up, no composite characters. No made-up, no composite stories. I've changed fewer than 5 place names. But if a vignette in the story takes place in Korea, then it took place in Korea. If it takes place in the book in Texas, it took place in Texas. So you can be assured that I've searched the historical record as much as is possible, and we've made sure that we haven't claimed something as a fact unless we can have a surety that this is a fact. In other words, there are some stories where we have different stories or different pieces from people that have the same level of credibility. Maybe an aunt on this side says this, but an aunt on this side says this. So where we haven't been able to figure out which is right, we had not picked and said, we're going to go with this one because it's a better story. So you will, from time to time, see a phrase in the book like, so the story goes, or it's been said, or so I've been told, to indicate we think both of these pieces are correct, and here's why, there's some credibility here, and maybe someday we'll see how they both fit together. But nonetheless, here's the 2 possibilities. So it is a true story. It is an incredible story. But you can be assured that even though we've known each other a long time, I had no reason to suspect anything she said was not true. I felt a responsibility to the reader. I'm not just going to say, yeah, I know her, she's telling me the truth. I vetted it.
One of the things that really, and if you have not read this before, read it. One of the things that happened to me, and I'm not an outwardly emotional person about 90% of the time, especially depending on the setting, but as I sat at my dinner table, I stopped no less than 5 times. And even thinking about it, I'm kind of tearing up now. I cried. I had to stop reading, probably because of my love for you, and thinking, oh, but if I'd have been there, I would have done this.
Popped that dude.
I would have been right there. And
there's people she's forgiven that I'm still angry with.
Well, when I think about that, I paused because one of my favorite characters in the book is my favorite character because I feel like they were the most flawed, and not the bad person flawed, but Grandma. In
Granny.
the book. So I wanted to ask you about this, Catherine, and how you do this, because in the book, Grandma, she does her level best to do everything so great for you, but then toward the end, I don't know if you would categorize it as lets you down, or lets Charlotte down, or lets the character down, or kind of goes away, closes eyes. I don't know how you say it, but it hurt me because I felt like I identified with that as a human individual, that we have all these big things, and sometimes we can't follow through with the big things that we want to accomplish. Catherine.
Sure. Well, that's I'm going to be super fair to my to Granny. She I think at the point in her life where she got involved to help me, she was driven by a lot of regret missed opportunities to do the right thing when she was younger and her family was younger, where she should have been there for some of my father's victims, and she wasn't, including her own daughter and my dad's sister. And so I think a lot of her actions were motivated by some regret to do the right thing. And when she began to help me, I think she saw my future if I would take advantage of her help, and I didn't waste it. She saw my future planning out a certain way, and there could be no other way but that way. Sometimes as parents, I think we make that mistake. We envision the success of our children unfolding in a certain way. When they deviate at all from that, we start to panic, and we want to control them into this one way. And sometimes we don't trust them to know, to receive inspiration for themselves on how to have a good life. And but after being rescued from this and largely to her help and her getting involved, I began to make some mistakes of my own, right? All the way up until then, most of the terrible things in my life were the choices of other people. And now that I had some freedom to choose for myself, I was making some bad choices. I wasn't off to a good start. And I am sure she felt disappointed by that. She had taught me to do better. I am sure that she felt even a little betrayed, that she had sacrificed so much to help me. Even the relationship with her own son, she knew that she might never speak to him again because of her involvement in helping me escape that abuse. And to have sacrificed so much and then to watch me make what she felt like were terrible mistakes, I probably was letting her down, and she probably felt betrayed. And so she was the easiest of all of them to forgive for that letdown. I'm not even sure it was much of a letdown. She just couldn't understand, I think, that that you can't control somebody's outcome, that we're never in control of our life. I felt, it's hard to say that at 15 years old, which is the time frame that we're talking about, that I knew what I wanted out of life, and I knew who would make me happy, and that Joshua was that for me, and that I wanted something different than what my life over my family has given to their progenitors generation after generation. And I didn't want that. I wanted something different, and I knew that in order to have it, I would leave my family. And so I'm sure that hurt her terribly. And a lot of the things that she did that let me down, it was probably motivated again by hurt and loss. So, maybe we both needed to forgive each other a little bit.
Well, your story arc really kind of mirrors that classic Greek hero's journey in many ways, and it feels like you had this series of tasks that you had to accomplish before you could be what you are right now, which is lovely, amazing, adorable, beautiful,
Sure.
and every other positive adjective that you can come up with.
Sure.
Okay? I've had a contemptuous relationship with a mom, with a sibling before.
A little bit. A little bit.
And Ted, when you were listening to her recount this, and we've already talked about the incredible thing. How do you tell this tale without, and this is for both of you, how do you protect the guilty or the innocent and still be true to whatever this relationship is? Because I couldn't have survived that. I can tell you right now.
I think Ted did it really well by telling a little bit of their story as well, about how my mother came to be who she is, some of the trials that she went through. And in my sister's defense, she was brought up to be my rival. It was encouraged for us to compete. It was never was it ever taught that we should love each other, ever, or feel compassion for one another. It was just never nurtured in our family. And so my sister's defense, a lot of her behavior was something that she was not only taught, but maybe even expected from our parents. And we were taught that the good child, the favorite child, is going to be the one who can do better than the other child. And to make the other child look bad was essential to that goal. So
Now, I'm going to ask you this, Josh.
Okay.
Your character in here. Man. Toward the end of the book, and again, if you haven't read it, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but toward the end of the book, you have perhaps one of those experiences that as a man, you always dream about this. You get to see the bad guy, and you get to give them, everything that they deserve, and you don't allow your character to do that. In fact, there's a plot twist there that I know you, so I guess it wasn't plot twisty in that sort of way, but it was a plot twist.
I know who you're talking about.
You know exactly what
Yes.
I'm talking about.
Well, interesting enough, at the very beginning of when I found about the abuse that she had gone through, and when we
I never
first got
really
married, she didn't share, like, she
Yeah.
shared so little. Like, it was quite interesting. I find out, when they started doing this book, that I find out a lot of things secondhand, which is okay. I mean, she was worried that I was going to change the way I felt about it. And absolutely no, it made my love grow even more and more. But back to what you were saying is, when I had found out about that, I had literally said underneath my breath, I said, and I told her, I said, look, if I ever see this man, I will black bag him. I will end him. This is going to happen. I said, I better never see him. And then, when he kind of came back into our life, suddenly, realizing that he was also diagnosed with a cancer, had a cancer diagnosis, but he just wanted to be a part of his grandchildren's lives and wanted to seek forgiveness in his own way. I basically told him, I said, well, he'll never be alone with his grandchildren, never have a chance, an opportunity to hurt them the way that do this. So it was a very standoffish point. But ultimately, when I was at the hospital and he was on his deathbed, and I look down and I see the agony in his eyes. I see him struggling to take the next either breath or just a moment before he slipped into a coma, and him looking me up in the face and begging for forgiveness. I kind of wish he'd done it for her, because he never really did say that to her, but he said it to me. I have never in my entire life felt such peace of why forgiveness is so necessary. It's for us. It's not for the other individual. It is for us, but ultimately to feel that ultimate peace that we need in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
That he looks at me up in the, because he never really called me his son-in-law or whatever you want to call it or so forth. But he looks up and says, you could be no more son to me had you been born to me. And I'm so very sorry for what I have done. And then, of course, he slips into a coma. And then ultimately, in the end, when Catherine and I went to the hospital room because they said it was about time to shut off the machines, he had given me the power of attorney to shut off the machines. So you must be careful what you say or wish for, because I had said that ultimately that I would black bag him or end his life. And ultimately, I was the one who had the permission to shut off the machines when he was brain dead.
It's not what you thought, though.
It's not what I thought.
Yeah,
So
Joe, this goes back to, I'm sorry, you wouldn't.
You have to be really careful.
This goes back to your question before that one. We tried to be fair to all the people in this book without making excuses for bad behavior.
Nope.
Because one of the themes that runs through this book is judgment and forgiveness. And one of the statements made in there is that good people do bad things, and bad people do good things, and desperate people do just about anything. And so it's possible to judge a person's actions without harshly judging them. And that's the key to reaching a point of forgiveness. We can't expect or want Heavenly Father, or whatever your concept of justice or karma is, we can't hope or expect that He treats others harshly when we expect mercy for ourselves. It's just not the nature of God and shouldn't be our nature.
Absolutely. So there are two bits of symbolism in here that kind of run throughout the entire course of the book, Ted, and kind of touch on that just real briefly. We open the book with the rose, and throughout the book we have this tornado. How does the tornado not destroy the rose? How do we get the end where the rose is intact?
Well, the rose is Charlotte's mother, and I don't know that she's intact. This isn't her story, and I'm not trying to avoid your question. This is, but
Maybe let me clarify that a little bit. I know the rose is the mom, but in many ways, me as the reader, I feel like
it's Charlotte too.
Charlotte is the rose also, because Charlotte has taken so many of those things and maybe kind of...
Okay, I'm glad you brought this up, Joe. At the beginning of the book, Ted talks a little bit about roses. How many species of roses, how many hybrids, what man has done to manipulate the rose. And it just so happens that my favorite flower is a sterling rose, and it has been for a long time. It's a manipulated flower. It's not a natural rose. It's something that was engineered, I guess you could say, and it doesn't have any thorns. And that's how I think of myself, as my mother is this beautiful red rose with thorns. And because of the things that I've been through and the way I've been manipulated, I would like to hope, my kids could probably be the one to tell you if I made it, but I had hoped to become a rose with no thorns. And as a matter of fact, when I have a daughter, McKenna, every time I performed on this stage for the Valley Players, afterwards she would gift me with a sterling rose. And so how does the rose survive the tornado?
Yes.
This is an easy question for me. I'm glad of who I've become. And at this point, I'm going to speak openly as a Christian, that I believe that I was with Heavenly Father in heaven before I came to earth. And He sat me down and He says, "Catherine, what kind of woman do you want to become?" And we talked about that for a minute, and I told Him I wanted to be brave, and I wanted to be forgiving and compassionate. I wanted to be strong, and I probably had many romantic ideas, knowing that I'm a romantic. And He smiled sadly at me, maybe, and He said, "Well, if you're going to be compassionate, you must first need to understand suffering. And if you're going to be forgiven, you will need to be offended. And if you're going to be strong, you will carry great burdens." And when I was born and I came to this earth, He kept His promise. And I got to go through the experiences that if I would choose not to waste them, I would become something remarkable. And that if I would not settle for mediocrity, I could become someone who is forgiving. Now, it just so happened that my dad qualified to be the villain of that story, but I needed one. In order to have triumph, there had to be a villain. And I'm sad that it wound up largely being my parents, among other men who had no morality at all. But I needed that to become who I am. And this is where we don't excuse what they've done, but we find it useful to become stronger.
See, if I would have been a better question asker, Ted, you would have understood that's what I was looking for.
Maybe it's just because I know how you think, Joe.
Okay, I've got two questions, and then I want to go ahead and start wrapping this up. And it's kind of, one question is going to piggyback off of what you just said. You said every story needs a villain, and this story just happened to be your parents were the villains. But as you get to the end of the book, there's a whole chapter, and ironically, chapter 13, devoted to the voodoo
The
lady.
voodoo lady.
And I felt every second of that chapter. I felt, because this has happened in my life, on the peripheral, there's always, you don't know what it is.
No.
There's something that doesn't want you to succeed. And they're throwing things in front of your path.
We learn in the scriptures that in the beginning that there was a conflict in heaven where Satan and his angels were cast out from heaven. Where did they go? Well, it's my belief that they came here to tempt and try humankind. And if that's true, then these are people that we were with in a premortal life with our Heavenly Father. And these are people we probably maybe even loved, who did not accept Jesus Christ as their Savior. And when they came here, who better to send to us to tempt us and try us than the people that we knew? And I think that's exactly what's happened. I do believe in an unseen world where there are spirits, both good and evil. And this is my experience with one of them. If someone can have a guardian angel, I think she's the exact opposite.
That's fair enough.
The Screw Tape Letters, written by C.S. Lewis, who was a devout Christian, speaks a lot about this idea that there is an evil spirit that's often assigned to people to tempt them and to try them under the direction of an enemy.
Well, if you read this book, you may have had more than one that were in your
It
path.
took more than one to get me.
It took a whole gang. So my last question, and I'm going to ask the same question to each of you, and I'm going to start with Josh, and then I'll work toward Ted. I just finished the book, and I put it down. What's the one thing, if I had to put it in a statement, what's the one thing that I could take from this book, put in my pocket, and have with me for the rest of my life? And I'll start with you, Josh.
The atonement is real.
Okay. So what does that mean?
There's opportunities in your life to be able to change and make anew, that you can decide how you want to be, the choices that we make every day in our life. We can either choose to let it keep us down, or we can choose to let it change us to that perfect creature that we need to become. And that's just throughout my whole life. I was telling Kat, that's on our way out here, because I was kind of explaining to her. I said, "Did you know I was going to jump off the stage to ask you to dance?"
The night we met.
But the night we met, she goes, "I never really thought about it." And I said, "Well, I felt 100%. I could not. My mind. This probably should have told you this because this is maybe you could have added something into this." I said was fixated because I was the DJ at the dance, and I was putting playlists together. But while I was doing that, I was looking out to see where she was because I just felt like I needed to see her, to get to know her, because I felt like God was putting me there. You just understand what I'm saying? I hope I'm making sense.
No,
But
you're making perfect sense. Now,
it was just, I couldn't. I was like, I won't think I'll be able to breathe if I don't get down there and ask that girl to dance. And I was like, she's going to be with you 30 plus years now from now.
Oh no, you're stuck with me forever.
I know. But to this day, we're 31 years later, I'm just realize I could change because I was, like I said, I was a punk. And to feel like God is there, that there's an opportunity to repent and start over each day, to ask for the best thing. Like, people always ask, what do you want in a spouse? What do you want in somebody? What do you want the most? And forgiveness, because I'm gonna offend a lot,
Well,
and I know I'm gonna need her forgiveness because I mess up a lot.
He picked something I was good at because I'm a terrible cook.
you are
I
not a
needed the
terrible cook,
forgiveness.
by the way. I don't want to hear that.
I cook like 3 things really good, and that's
Well,
it.
then those 3 things are amazing.
And I think one of those is Jamie's recipe for chicken spaghetti. So.
Some of the vices and things, of course, in my life that I've struggled with throughout my entire life, from childhood on, realizing you can overcome. You just have to want it. You have to want it. It has to be there. You have to want it.
Absolutely.
And what's most important in your life? what is the most important thing in your life? That's when we say, I love you more. You have to love them more than you love yourself. And just that's with our family, with everyone around us. That's what I could offer from this.
Okay, Catherine, same thing. What is Charlotte, what has she told me?
Hopefully she's taught you the difference between the truth and the devil's counterfeits. And what I mean by that is, Ted mentioned earlier the difference between value and worth. If you look them up in the dictionary, they pretty much mean the same thing. But to me, to Charlotte, it meant something completely different. When I was going through, especially the abuse by the men, this group of men, I felt valued. I was told constantly that I was beautiful, that they thought about me all day long, and how they could not live without me. And understanding how addiction and things like that work, I bet they did. And I felt that they did. And when I was rescued from that, almost immediately I felt diminished. I felt I had lost my value. I wasn't valuable to anyone until someone very, very special to me, her name is Joyce, taught me the difference between value and worth. And she taught me that worth is something that came from God, and that if I would seek out my worth, I would find him. And I think it was Jamie Devereaux, my friend who's here today, who gave the analogy. She was teaching a class to which I was present for, and I'll never forget it, but she pulls out a $100 bill, and she says, if I take this $100 bill, and she rubbed it under her arms, and then she put it on the floor, and she stomped on it, and she named a couple of other foul things she might have done with it, and she's like, would you still want it? And all the children in the class said yes. And she said, why? And they said, well, it's because it's still worth $100. And her lesson that I'll never forget was that's all of us. It doesn't matter what we've put ourselves through. It doesn't matter what's happened to us. Our value is something that is given to us by God, and it can never change. I mean, our worth. Our worth is something that is given to us by God, and it cannot change, and it cannot diminish no matter how. And in the scriptures, he says that the worth of souls is great in the sight of God. And so if I want anybody to take anything from this, is to learn that the value is something the world will put on you, and your worth is something that you were born with, and it will never diminish. You can waste it. You can waste it, but it's always there.
Now, to be fair, I have it on good authority that Jamie is mostly sugar and spice. So I don't know if that analogy would play very well in another audience. But that's a great point right there. So we learn that change is real, and we learn that we have worth. And it's up to us to decide what that is. Ted, as the author of this thing, what should I take from this?
Well, you've heard it, but I like the sound of my own voice, so I'll answer it. It is that. If there's anything I want people to take from this, it's that you are of infinite worth. And unfortunately, people have to hear that over and over and over again, because there are plenty of forces in life that tell us that we're not. You are of infinite worth, and you are the author of your own story. And it's okay to feel sorry for yourself a bit. It's not about always having a smile on your face, and sometimes we can barely muster a grin. Sometimes we have to cry. But I hope people never lose sight that we exist to experience joy. It's why we exist. And we can take the will of our own life, and no matter how hard it is or how bad it is, we can control it. Some of the people that are my heroes, and we don't have time to go into them, but let's think, Elizabeth Smart, you know who she is. Admiral James Stockdale. These are people that made statements in the lowest part of their lives, 4 simple words, and so I decided. And that is the key. Your past is not the best indicator of your future. Your present is. What are you going to do now to have a more fulfilling life? You're in control of that. And incrementally, whatever piece of your life you control, and it may be infinitesimally small, but there is a part that you have complete influence over. if you'll own that part, you can do incredible things. You could experience, sorry, I still get emotional over this too. You can experience joy and light in the darkest and most painful parts of life if you realize how much worth you have and how much control you have. And it may take a lifetime of digging and scratching and climbing. But as you look back incrementally, you'll see, holy cow, I was here and now I'm here. It's in your hands. You have all the gifts you need.
Well, what I'm taking from this is that you're going to cry when you read this book, so just be prepared for that.
You'll laugh a few times too.
Nolan. Where's Nolan at? Nolan's out there. Okay, I've arbitrarily said that we have time for 3 questions. If there are anyone in our audience that has some questions, Nolan has a mic and he can walk over to you because we want to save enough time for the book signing and all that other cool stuff back there. And I'm going to put my hand over my eyes like this so I can see, not because I'm saluting you. Yes, lovely girl in the front row would like to ask a question. She's not a plant at all, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. There are technical difficulties.
We can repeat your question if we need to.
Yeah.
Yes, so this one is for Ted, please. Aside from having the opportunity to tell such a dynamic story, what were some other motivating factors for doing such extensive research and about places and timelines in the characters in your book?
So the question is, aside from the privilege of telling a great story, why did I care to? What motivated me to do the work? If this could have just been, these are my words, but the question, this could have just been, on this day this happened, on this day this happened. Why did I put in the work, do the research and all those? It's a simple answer, because I love you. And for those of you who don't know who this is one of their daughters. This was a labor of love for me. We've known each other for about 15 years. Our son dated one of their daughters, and when we met, we just clicked. And in fact, we told our kids, when your relationship falls apart, you're going to have to find a way of being cool with each other because we're keeping each other in the divorce.
And we did.
And we did.
We did.
The heck with the kids.
And they did.
And they did. And so our other son dated this daughter. And a niece that we were raising dated their son. So
we had 3 horses in the race.
right,
and
I know,
could
and we
not
still couldn't
get
be
any of
family.
them hitched.
So our families are intertwined, and we spent a lot of time together. And when I retired from my career, we were together for a family event, and Charlotte asked, "What are you going to do next?" I said, "I know, I'm still thinking about that." And she just casually said, "Maybe you should write my memoirs."
I was kidding.
And I knew that. But driving home, the introduction came to my mind, and I wrote it down and sent it to an emailer to her and said, "I know you were joking, but I couldn't get this out of my head." And she called me with tears in her eyes, and so we decided to write a book. But still, at that point, it was just for you and your siblings and your children.
We never, well, I didn't think we would ever hold a published book.
Yeah, just wanted to do something to express not just me, but my wife's love for you, your family. And it grew. It grew. We realized this is a story that needs to be told. There's a larger group of people that need to hear this story. And so again, I always wanted to put the context in it for you guys. But I figured if I'm going to do that, then I might as well do it all the way. And I'm glad I did, because now, there are a lot more people reading this book.
Absolutely. Look for more and more as the days and the months progress. All right. Any more questions? Yes, girl in the front.
Another daughter.
Don't tell the audience that.
First off, I want to thank you, Uncle Ted, for working with our mother on this book, and for letting her leave something to us. And it's wonderful that you did that for not just her but for us as well. But this question is actually for Charlotte, or my mother. So I have seen movies that have been kind of like where this is based off of a true story, but they don't necessarily talk about what the person went through to have this story told. Like, how did you feel? What did you experience? What was your experience telling the
In the
story?
process?
Yeah, the process, because you never hear about that, and I feel like that's something that'd be very
Oh dear.
enlightening.
Well, my first answer to Ted when he's like, let's write this, and I was like, are you kidding? I've been trying for 30 years to forget all this stuff. Last thing I want to do is hash it out again. And we knew it would be difficult, but I think in every way that you can imagine, like whatever you imagine, that was it. I had night terrors. I think I poked this poor man in the eye at least once, maybe twice in the middle of the night. But the biggest surprise was some unresolved issues that I still had that I didn't know. I thought I had pretty well ironed out all the wrinkles in my life when it came to the trauma, the hardest one being hunger. I think out of all of the things that I went through, physical hunger was probably the hardest thing, the most humiliating of them all. And however, the surprise was, as Ted and I would go through these interviews, and I would talk about these things, just to be clear, he would have questions and ask me, so I don't quite understand how we got from here to here. And when he would ask me questions like that, I would begin to feel an enormous amount of anxiety. My neck would turn red, and my breathing changed, and he would say, do you need a break? Do we need to stop? And it wasn't because what I was saying was particularly hard for me to talk about. I didn't think he believed me. I was afraid of not being believed. And it took me back to the times when I was young, where I tried to ask for help and no one believed me. Or they simply didn't want me to be their problem. The apathy was something that I had forgotten I'd gone through. And until I started to tell Ted my story, I don't think I had resolved any of that. And to this day, I still have anxiety about people believing things that I say. When I received my cancer diagnosis early this year and I decided to share it on Facebook, I was afraid of all the people who weren't going to believe me. How stupid is that? But I am grateful to the people who did believe me. And during that time, I realized, the telling of this story with Ted, I realized that there were people in my life that I should have been more grateful for at the time. Other people outside of my grandmother who helped me. And so I made an effort to go back and tell those people how much I love them and how grateful I am for their help and how I did not waste it. I used it to make a good life for myself. And some of those people are here tonight, or this afternoon. The Fidos are here, and they are my beloved people. Your parents are not necessarily the people you're born to. Your parents are the people who teach you about God and teach you that you have worth and love you no matter what you go through. And so these people are my parents. The Fidos, the Hopes. In real life, I call them the Devereaux and the Stewarts. And I will love them forever. And so not only was I able to go and find these people I hadn't talked to in years, and there was a lot of miracles along the way in trying to find these people. Some of them were difficult to find. And when I did find them, there was no other explanation than God had a hand in it. And so those are the two things that I think were in the process, is being able to go back and tell these people thank you, and to finally find peace with the apathy that I went through. Okay, one more?
Okay, you stop making me cry. We're done with that cry business, okay? All right, I think we have time for one more. Yes?
to other people out there, readers specifically, that have been through some of the trials you've been through, how would you say, but how would you advise them to turn that into their strength instead of allowing it to define them and repeating processes and patterns that they had to experience and then end up ultimately becoming the monster that they despised?
Sure. Okay, so one of the ways in which I've been able to do that is I've been able to help other children that I could identify as having been a victim. There's been a number of cases where, especially at church, I've been assigned to teach children's classes, in which case I've been able to see the behavior of a particular child that I had suspect was going through terrible abuse. And I was able to, because of my experience, report that to the people who needed to know, and they were able to save these children from their circumstances. And so that whole takes one to know one. That is something that I use as a strength to help other people, and that helps me to, does it define who I am? Yes, but it defines me as a hero, maybe a little one. And then in other ways, I think it can be reversed, and it happens a lot with adolescent children and young adults, where they see themselves in me. They see the abuse. An abused person can spot another abused person. And in this very theater, I've had long talks with some of the young people here who
We love dearly.
who needed to hear that it's possible to go through these things and still be happy, and to find love, to be loved, to love others, to do hard things, to accomplish great things. And I'm not special. There isn't any one of you who can't do exactly what I've done. There's nothing special about me, except that maybe I knew that I could. And the only difference between you and me is that you don't yet. And so being able to help others is a good way. As far as not succumbing to, I don't know how to answer that. It never occurred to me that I would ever treat anybody the way I've been treated. And I have tried my hardest, and I think those who've known me for a long time can say that I'm at least a B+ student, but I've tried my hardest to never allow what has happened to me to affect the way I treat people. I get treated by jerks so badly sometimes, and then people want to say, well, they've had a hard life. And I think, oh, hey, wait a second. I've had a hard life, and I have never treated somebody that way. And so I wanted to have nobility, and I wanted to have dignity. I wanted to walk uprightly before God. And with these things, with this motivation, and you're at the core of your heart, you will never do those things to other people, ever.
You can change.
If I know that was question number 3, but if I can jump in here. So one thing that has occupied my mind for many years off and on, and you mentioned the exposure I've had to some wonderful experiences with people and also some tragic ones, is I've often wondered what light goes off in a person that they treat others poorly. But more than that, I'm fascinated by what light goes on in somebody that makes them say, mine is the last generation that will live like this. This behavior will not be passed to another generation. And so I'm fascinated with that theme, and we see some practical answers in the book, in her life. I think the other thing I want to say, and I left this out when you asked what's the story here. You talked about definitions. And I think it's important to remember that we are not defined by the pieces of us that are broken. Don't let those things get out of proportion to the whole definition of who you are or who you want to be.
I love it.
Okay, before we move on, I got to know what Misty wanted to ask me, or us.
This is the bonus question. We're going to call this 3.1.
Bonus round.
3.1.
This one's worth Double points.
I just wanted to know, what was the most difficult part of writing this book for each of you?
The most difficult part of writing this book for each of us. My husband finding out what I had been through. Yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Watching her go through this and endure the
night
rehashing
terrors.
and the night terrors,
Yeah.
and her waking up, slapping me in the face, which was okay. She could slap me in the face a billion times, just as long as I'm there, the one that she can slap in the face, so that she can get over this.
It's not, as long as it's not your slap, it's somebody else's.
Josh, the problem that you two have, though, is you have swords hanging on the walls.
Oh,
and
man.
bedroom and stuff. So
I'm
we
gonna
have to be
cut-
very careful in the
cut-
night.
He lives with the sword of Damocles.
That's right.
I've got a few answers to that, and this, well, this sounds very egotistical, but I'm going to say it because Catherine said it to me, and when Charlotte, and I didn't realize that maybe that was true, so she said it. As we go through some of the things that I wrote and she reviewed it, she made the comment, "It's like you were there." And this is another indication of her character. Her response to that was to apologize to me that that I was experiencing some of the same emotions she experienced. Obviously, hearing it secondhand, it's nothing like the experience she had, but it was very emotional for me. It was also, I found, it's a lot of work to write a book. If there's any aspiring authors out there, it's a lot of work. And writing the book is less work than writing all the proposals and trying to get a publisher. You know? So for me, the difficult point was trying to stay objective and tell the story right. Maybe that's the most difficult part. She was very open with me, and she said many times over, "It's your book. I trust you to tell the story the way you think it should be told." And I felt a great, and still do, feel a great responsibility there. And as you read the book, you'll see why. That was a lot of trust. A lot of trust placed in me, and I didn't take that lightly.
You didn't let me down, though.
Thank you. Love you.
All right, author Ted L. Turner, Catherine Hare, Josh Hare. This has been a Q&A with the Tornado's Daughter. Run, don't walk to Amazon to purchase this book. And then if you're here with us, politely walk into the foyer. Don't run each other over. But they'll be out in the hallway for some more question, answer, light refreshment, book signings. Thank everyone that's been on the stream with us. And you'll be able to find this in perpetuity, or what's the word there?
In perpetuity.
Yeah. There we go.
So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Google Play eBook, Nook, Kindle.
All of the places that you love your books. Yeah. This is the riveting true story of Charlotte Walt. And it starts several generations before her. It's going to capture you. It's going to make you cry. But above all, you will take something so powerful with you that you'll be able to use in your life, that this will be a tool to help you be better. I'm Joe Roberts, and we are going to move out into the foyer. Thank you for joining, Joe.
Thank you.
Good job.